Well, I am now going to introduce Ebony Burroughs, who is an Agilist at Insight. Ebony Burroughs has spent most of her 20-plus year career in the world of information technology in various functions and roles. In more recent years, she has been coaching teams and organizations through implementing Agile concepts and practices and shifting to people-centric workplace cultures. Currently serves as the co-chair of Afro Professionals and Allies at Insight and has led sessions for the Charlotte chapter of Women in Agile. Please welcome Ebony, who is going to speak with us today about the cost of perfectionism.
Thank you. My slides are going to move for me. See them? Okay, well, first of all, hello. Thank you for coming to hear my talk. Yes, my name is Ebony Burroughs. I'm an Agile coach at Insight. I've been working in the world of Agile for about 7 or 8 years, but I've been in the world of technology for my entire career. Will not tell you how old I am. It's none of your business. So a little bit about me. I am obsessed with podcasts. It says that on my lanyard, so if anyone has great podcasts to recommend, see me in the back. I love comedy. I love the art of storytelling. Oddly enough, this is why I listen to a lot of horror. Stephen King is my best. All of his stories are the best for me, and not because it's just horror, but because Stephen King is really great at telling stories. And if you are a fan of Stephen King, you probably noticed that a lot of the heroes in his stories are kids. So that's another reason why I like his books and his writing. Going a little bit forward. So I want to just kind of talk about why perfectionism is so important in understanding perfectionism, why it's so important to me, and why it's important if you're working on Agile teams. Anyone here familiar with the concepts of Agile, working on Agile teams? Okay, cool. So a lot of this stuff won't be new to you. So we want to define perfectionism as a disposition to regard anything short of perfection as untenable, as unsatisfactory, okay? So if you're shooting for perfection, anything less than that, you just can't have it. This has great impacts on how you work as a collaborative member of an Agile team, how you work in your organizations, how you operate as a leader. So I want to give you a few characteristics of perfection. So there's this concept of social perfectionism, which is driven by being self-critical. You put a lot of pressure on yourself, and it's really motivated by wanting to avoid rejection from the outside world. Second, there's other-oriented perfectionism. That means you put a lot of pressure on other people to be perfect. So as we go through these characteristics, I want to kind of see, if any of this kind of resonates with you and how you work with people, how you are in your personal relationships. You hold people to very high standards when you are executing or acting on this other-oriented style of perfectionism. And that means that when people fall short, you may respond to that in a very negative way. And then lastly, the most balanced type of perfectionist characteristic is self-oriented. So that means that you have high standards for yourself, but you are, I like to use the term, you'll hear me say this a lot, you're agile. You are responsive, you are adaptive, you understand that change happens, and so you aren't so hard on yourself that the plan that you had at first needs to change, needs to update, but you don't shirk on quality. So I'm going to do a quick activity here. If you all got your cell phones out, if you would go to menti.com. You know what? I may have forgotten to update this code. See if you can put in 1569261. If you can't get in, that's okay. 1569261. Won't let you in? Okay, that's okay. Look, we're learning about perfection. You can get in? Yeah, we're being agile. Okay, so that's all right. I'm going to back up. So this is an opportunity for us all to be a little bit vulnerable. I was going to do this and it was going to be anonymous, but now you all have to participate, okay? Does anyone see themselves in these social perfectionist characteristics? Are you hard on yourself? Okay. Not surprising, a lot of hands are going up, okay? Anyone that feels like either in their personal relationships or their professional relationships that they tend to be really critical of other people? Okay? Hands going up. Anybody feel like they're pretty balanced? Like I've got high standards, but I'm not, killing myself or other people to meet them. Okay. So, if you were looking around, good question. You can be more than one. And most often, depending on the day, depending on the circumstances, we are more than one of these characteristics. But if you were looking around when we talked about social perfectionism, a lot of hands went up. That doesn't surprise me. The first time I did this talk, it was to an audience of young women in STEM. They're in college, women of color. And when I went through this and I did the anonymous poll, most of them saw themselves as social perfectionists. And when we're talking about women, especially women who are other members of other minority groups, we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And we know why, right? So we've been talking about the need to be responsive, the need to be perfect. We just heard conversations about how women still struggle to make the same amount of money that our men counterparts do. And so how do we respond to that? We work harder, we work longer hours, and women tend to be natural nurturers, right? So not only are we taking care of our teams and the people that we work with, we take care of our families. We're usually the point people that everyone goes to. Not all the time, not necessarily in my family, I'm not that person. But for many of us, we're the point person for caring for others, and we do it, everything we do, we just put so much energy into it, okay? So I want you to just think about those situations where you find yourself putting pressure internal, you find yourself putting pressure to be perfect externally, and then it's not about perfection, right? It's not about finding that perfect, how am I supposed to be? It's just recognizing when you're putting that perfect pressure yourself on others and finding that balance. So we're really just striving to be more self-oriented so we can be aware of what's going on around us. So yes, I am an Agilist, I'm an Agile coach. You probably, for those of you who understand Agile, these values are very familiar to you. If this is new, in the Agile concepts, we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We value working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and we value responding to change over following a plan. And that doesn't mean that the things on the bottom are not important. It's just that we prioritize the things on the top more. We're always striving to get to this place where people are first. Human centricity is first. We want to make sure that when we're building products and solutions that we're getting value out to our customers and the people that consume them over documenting the value that we want to provide for them. We want to make sure that we're always collaborating with people who can give us insights, no pun, insights about what our customers need. And we want to make sure that we're always being responsive. All right, so when we're in a changing world and we're product focused, our customers' needs and their wants are constantly changing. We also have 12 values that I will not go through, but I will point out just a couple of things with relationship to perfectionism. It's not an accident that the first principle of Agile is to satisfy our customer. But when we're working on teams to build products and solutions and we're focused on the perfection of a plan, how does that impede our ability to satisfy our customers when we know that what they need and what they want is always changing? Or the plan that we put together, when we realize that we've started working through a plan and now we've learned something, is it more important that the plan itself be executed perfectly? Or is it more important that we put ourselves in a space where we can learn and we can apply that knowledge of what we've learned while we were building as quickly as possible? One other thing I'll point out is the aim for sustainable pace. Now, I'm going to pause right there because I'm going to talk about that just a little bit further. There are 5 dysfunctions of a team. And many of you may have heard of this. If you haven't, check out the book by Peter Lencioni. It's called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Perfectionism has a critical impact on breeding dysfunctions when you're working with teams of people, right? So absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. So when we think about social perfectionism, when we think about other-oriented perfectionism, which are usually the ones that are a little bit more negative in outcomes, think about how those types of perfectionist characteristics could breed these types of dysfunctions within your team. If you're focused, if you're someone who's other-oriented, if you're someone who puts a lot of pressure on your teammates to be perfect, could that breed an absence of trust? Probably so. I mean, none of us are perfect all of the time. So, if we're working on something, if we're writing code, if we are documenting some information, there might be some business analysts in the room. If we're capturing requirements for something and maybe we miss something in our elicitation techniques, well, the team is they're impeded by that, and the team has to respond to that missing information. But if you're working with someone on your team who's constantly going, no, we should have had all of this from the very beginning, why didn't you know this? And they're making you feel small because you made a mistake, you probably don't want to admit that something went wrong. And then when we talk about the inattention to results, so again, this is all about quality, right? So if you're focused on perfection all of the time, but you're not putting yourself in a position to be responsive, then quality suffers. If you're writing code, and the code that you're writing, you're testing it yourself, you're not sharing how you're approaching the code, you're not sharing that with your teammates, you're not showing that working software, that working functionality. If you're kind of working in a very siloed approach, then you're not getting feedback. No one's giving you feedback about, what will be easier when you put this line in your code, try this out next time. No one's saying that I see what you're doing here, but the intent of this function that we're trying to get to will be better served if you programmed it this way. So think of perfection as something that is very internal, like you create this story for yourself about what's perfect. But when you are trying to combat that story of perfectionism, you're really seeking a lot of outside influence and information so you can make better choices. So progress isn't perfect. So this is kind of going back to what I was saying about one of those principles of Agile being sustainable pace. When we think about progress, we kind of set up unrealistic expectations for ourselves. So think about what you do every day. So I have this mantra personally, that I'm going to be a better version of myself today than I was yesterday. Anybody else have something like that? In my head, this is how my daily progress to that looks. Every day, I'm going to be a little bit better, a little bit better. Am I the only person that fails at that? No? Okay. So in reality, my progress towards being better looks a lot like this. I start out on Monday and I'm like, this is going to be a great week. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be collaborative. I'm going to listen. I'm going to have empathy for people. And Monday might start out really solid. But by Tuesday, somebody done got on my nerves. And so this is my progress towards being the better version of myself. It's a little lacking. It's going out. And then by Wednesday, hump day, I'm just like, it's not Friday yet. Or maybe you caught me in the meeting before my coffee kicked in really good, so I'm making less progress. And then, it sputters every day, right? But the point here is, even though your progress isn't perfect, you're still making progress. A little bit of progress is still progress. So just personally, I want to just share with everyone that not to focus on comparing yourself to what you did yesterday. Just focus on the progress that you want to make. A little bit of progress, a lot of progress, progress is progress. Okay? So when we're thinking about the reality of the progress that we're making, sustainable pace is an Agile principle. whether it's with our teams and the work that we're doing. So a lot of us have worked in sprints before, and every couple of weeks we're trying to deliver value to our customers or the people who consume the products that we're building. Well, again, we deliver a little bit or we deliver a lot. But what we're trying to do is find that constant pace where we can forecast how much value our teams are going to be able to deliver over time. Now, you might be saying, she's making a whole lot of IT references and applying them to our life. That's what I do. My whole life is Agile. I have a little Kanban board at my home about what I'm supposed to do. I have a WIP limit. I have an Agile dating experience. See me in the back. I'll tell you all about it. So a couple of points here that speed isn't the goal, all right? Again, it's not about speeding through progress. It's about finding that pace by which you can forecast the long-term value, okay? And if you speed through everything, you're gonna miss something. Also, inspect and adapt. Learn in the moment, adapt in the moment as you can. And, don't be so hard on yourself or your teams when it's like what we started with is not what we're doing, because it really just means that we've learned something along the way. Early in my Agile career, we've used this term, fail fast, and people, especially our clients, we're consultants, they don't like the word fail. I say it anyway, because sometimes we're gonna fail. But we wanna fail fast so we can learn fast, so we can adapt fast. I am not afraid of the word failure. Failure for me just means that there's something I didn't know that I know now. You want to prioritize to avoid overcommitment. So one of the reasons why my slide deck isn't perfect and y'all can get into in the poll is because I overcommitted this whole week and I forgot that I needed to update this code again. So, that was me. I need to make sure that if I do this talk again that I plan accordingly and prioritize things that are coming up. So those of us who have worked with backlogs before, we know that backlogs are always changing. Those who are not familiar with that term, your backlog is just your wish list, it's your honey-do list, it's a list of stuff you gotta do. And you might set out to say, I'm gonna get these 5 things done today. It's okay if only 2 of those things get done. Because you know why only 2 of those things got done? Because something else took priority. So this is why this is important. You got to understand how to shift with the changes in the priority of your day, shift with the changes in the priority that your consumer or your stakeholders are asking you to shift to. Now you want to manage that pace of change, right? You want to manage how often you have to react. There's a difference between responsiveness and reaction. When you're responsive, you can plan. You can plan to adapt. You understand how much work you can take in. You understand how much change you can accept. But when you react, everything is urgent. Everything is on fire. And so this is where we get to avoiding operating on the edge of chaos. So let's work on being more responsive, and let's work on being less reactive, or less reactive all of the time. I know I don't work well, so this is one of my managers sitting down here in the front, and we've had this conversation. And I'm just like, you know what? You can't give me a whole lot of stuff for me to have to respond to. I can't. I don't know how project managers in the room, I don't know how y'all do it. Stuff can't be on fire for me all of the time, every day. But that's how I work. I don't work well that way. So I try to operate as someone who is more responsive in my work than someone who is like, let's send all of the fires. Every time something catches on fire, let's send it to Ebony. They all know Ebony is not the person to send the fires to. Oh yeah, she's much better at handling that stuff. So I want to call out the lessons of design thinking. So you might have some designers in the building today. I love the workflow of design thinking. And design thinking has a direct connection to avoiding perfectionism. Now, if design thinking in this process is new to you, well, if you've worked in this process before, you may not have thought about design thinking being something that helps you kind of withstand perfectionism, but it does. So in design thinking, There's this concept of empathy. You're always thinking about what the user needs, what's important to the user, what their experience is going to be, which means you prioritize your customer all of the time. And this kind of goes back to getting out of your own head, getting out of yourself and think about what's perfect for you. And now you're thinking about what someone else needs in order to get what they need to get done. Design thinking is also a collective and collaborative working style. So again, working independently is a part of work. Okay, so like we're always going to have moments where we're in the corner, we're in our cubicle, we're in our home offices, and we're heads down and we're doing our stuff on our own. But a lot of good working practice really comes from sharing ideas all the time, and design thinking really does that a lot. It's, here's this idea, here's this approach, what do you think? Let's all ideate, okay? It unlocks hidden capabilities. So my undergraduate degree is in graphic design. I never thought, again, this was 1,000 years ago, I never thought I'd be anything more than someone who just created all of the time. It's all I wanted to do. And then I was exposed to working with teams, and I was exposed to working with scientists, and I was exposed to working with people who coded and people who are a lot more technically oriented than I was. And once I was exposed to working with teams like this, then I became more technically oriented. I learned how to code. Once I got exposed to working with people who did a really good job at handling fires, I learned how to handle fires when it was time for me to be that point person to do that. And now that I work at Insight, I'm exposed to working with leaders. And I never really saw myself as a leader, but now I'm a leader at Insight. And so my alarm just went off, said I need to finish up. So this is a quote by the author of The Grapes of Wrath. And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can just be good. So that's my talk, everybody.